You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show, episode 106, Wednesday, May 4th, 2022. How you doing, Christina Dennis?
I'm doing beautiful, Damon Frank. How are you?
I am great. We're coming to you a little bit late on Wednesday, and I'm just going to tell us because Christina overslept.
Yes.
Nothing to do with it. No,
Sure.
That's not it at all. We had some commitments we had to do this morning, so we're coming to you a little bit late, almost noon o'clock here in Los Angeles in California, but still all really great content for this episode number 106. Right. Christina, a lot going on this week. Mother's Day.
Yes.
The Recovered Life discussions have been blowing up. A lot of people, we're going to address that later in the show. A lot of people are nervous about Mother's Day. They have anticipation, all different kinds of feelings going on. And then later on in the show, we're going to address some kind of, I think, shocking, but positively, really positive information about drug use with adolescents. So great show ahead, guys. So, hold on. Got a great show ahead, and we're going to dive into it shortly.
Yes. Before we do, though, I want to let everybody know this show is being brought to you by Recovered Life contributors like me and people like you. Please like, share, follow, leave us a comment so we can continue the discussion. Also visit info.recoveredlife.us. You can leave a donation that helps us to keep helping others and join the network, which is completely free. That's info.recoveredlife.us.
Thank you so much for mentioning that, Christina. We've built quite a community on Recovered Life, and part of this is our Recovered Life discussions, which we've now integrated into the podcast. So guys, if you're watching this either live or on a replay on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, head over to the Recovered Life Show on anywhere that you download podcasts, Google, Apple, Stitcher, any of it, and you can access those Recovered Life discussions, as well as all the discussions that we're also putting on our network, Recovered Life. So please join us there, and thank you so much for mentioning that, Christina. So one of the topics I have to say that was on your Setting Healthy Boundaries discussion that you had was this whole idea of Mother's Day. There was a lot of people that were, they were concerned. They were concerned about going to Mother's Day, staying sober, or they were moms themselves and they were sober, right?
Yes.
And they maybe don't have the best relationship with their kids. So let's dive into this Mother's Day. Why is it such a big deal for people in recovery?
Well, undoubtedly, it's probably the most complicated. It's the first relationship that we have in our lives. And, fathers play a huge role. I do not want to diminish their role, but your role with your mother, first, everyone has one or had one, and they are the giver of life. And as a recovering codependent, I learned that not only did I have direct messages of not being enough from my mother, she didn't think she was enough. And so I had no idea the impact. I had a certain amount of abuse. I've been very open about sharing the trauma. I understand that the woman who raised me had her own issues, but it is one of those nuanced, complicated relationships. And so I'm glad we talked about it in Recovered Life discussions, and I'm glad we're talking about it now. It's important to say, hey, this is coming up and I've got something to deal with.
Well, whether you have a great mom, like I had a really fabulous mom, and or whether you have a troubled relationship with your mom, I think for people in recovery, Mother's Days comes with expectations. And I don't think any mother wanted to say, oh, my son's an alcoholic. You know what I mean? I don't think anybody wanted that, right? So there is, especially in early recovery, when you're maybe not looking at recovery and sobriety as positive yet, as one of the best things that's happened in your life. You're looking at it as maybe it's like one of the worst things that's happened in your life. I would say stick with it. That will change, but there comes a lot of expectations, and people just around family. We talk about this in Christmas and Easter and all these other holidays that come up, that there's this, I got to get through this.
Right, and it can be surprising. It can be surprising because we haven't taken the time to look at the expectations. And whether you're new in recovery or you've been around a long time, you cannot get away from the expectations. I was in the hospitality business for years, and this is no doubt the worst day to be in the hospitality business, because it is as if the entire world, or those of us in the States, are trying to shove in a year's worth of appreciation into one day. It's incredibly stressful, even if you have a wonderful relationship with your mother. And I hate the idea of, hate's a strong word. I do not like being told that this is what you're going to do on this day. And so I love that we're talking about it, because feelings are going to come up. Whether you pick up and drink, or your family does, feelings are going to come up. The mother's going to have expectation. I'm a mother, and we don't often think about, well, what is it that I really want to have happen on this day?
Yeah. I think it's good. So much of holidays in the United States have been commercialized. So
Yes,
it's really about what you're going to spend, what you're going to do, where you're going to go, how that day is going to go. And it doesn't really leave any opening to really connect with
right.
people during that period of time, because the expectations and the stakes are so high. I think a lot of people feel it's like, oh, it's like it's all has to go perfectly. Now, I want to address something else, Christina, because a lot of people come from alcoholic homes, and this
Right.
is also drinking holiday. If your mother was an alcoholic, or there was dysfunction in your house and there was other alcoholism with relatives, they're all getting together and they probably have that cocktail plan. We're
Yes.
going to start off with the mimosa. We're going
Yeah.
to go,
Champagne.
the
Yep.
whole thing. Yeah. The whole thing that's laid out. And that can make a lot of people, especially in early recovery, nervous.
Right, right. It does. The intense emotion and expectation around it can really set somebody off and be in a vulnerable position. This holiday means a lot to a lot of different people. There are people that are mourning Mother's Days. There are people that want to be a mother and can't be a mother. There is so many opinions and weight attached to this holiday that we cannot not talk about it if you're in early recovery. You have to treat it as intensely as we treat, the traditional Christmas day. It is that thorny and that complicated.
Yeah, I think you do. And I think, having this plan, we talk about this a lot. If you are going to a family that has dysfunction, or maybe your relationship with your mom isn't the way that you wanted it to be, right? And I know
Right.
with COVID, the expectations are much higher because people have been locked away. And, here in Los Angeles, COVID is running rampant again, and it's out there. So now people are nervous. There's that on top
Hmm.
of it, right? So this whole idea of connection, and how do you connect, and what do how do you do this, adds this layer of complexity. I always say slow down. Start with, how am I going to be able to achieve what I really want, which is, that connection with mom, being able to spend a little bit of time. Maybe that's virtually. Unfortunately, my mom lives in another town, so we're
Okay.
not going to be able to see her. So, we're going to have to do a virtual kind of thing. How do I plan that so that, everybody's expectations can be met, and also everybody feels comfortable and they got what they wanted out of Mother's Day?
I love that you brought that up. It's one of the first things I tell people. We may have an expectation and an idea of what it looks like, but the person that you're honoring may not really want that, or they want something different. And so having that conversation with your mother, or mothers in your family, right? Because we can honor mothers without them being our mother, is so important. It starts to set those healthy boundaries. We have to know what our limit is and what we're able to do. And I tell people, cash in that floating holiday. First of all, there's so much mayhem out there. Everybody's trying to get a reservation at the hot brunch place, or trying to figure out what they can do. Cash it in. Send your mother to the spa and pick another day that you can really connect with her. Ask her what she really, really wants, but be honest with yourself about what you are capable. It's much worse to show up with this expectation that you're going to be able to handle it, and then not be able to handle it or have that blowout than it is to go ahead and be honest and say, what's going to work for me is this day. I want to celebrate you, but it's too much to be out there.
Well, yes, absolutely. And I think one of the things is too in early recovery, because, Christina, both you and I work with people that are in early recovery.
Yes.
And a lot of the times that they find out, a couple months in, that a lot of their relationships are codependent. They're maybe
Yes.
messed up a little bit. And there is a lot of anger a lot of the times that has to do with family members and especially parents. And, you have to pick the appropriate time. I always say, Christmas is not the time to sit down and tell your aunt and uncle, grandparents, or mother and father or siblings about how they hurt you in the second grade or whatever, right?
Right.
It's not an appropriate time. It's like being able to be a right picker of the appropriate time to do that.
Right.
Make an appointment with that person. Make it in a not charged area. Don't run in with huge confessions, apologies, resentments, wanting to get things straight during times that aren't really appropriate for it. And I find that is what happens. It's like, if I look back and I say, okay, what holidays didn't go well, Christina? It all had to do with like resentments or trying to resolve something that shouldn't have been resolved during that time.
Well, you said it. You said it. And I think that comes with setting too high of an expectation on ourselves. We will think, I'm going to make it up on this day. Or let's say you're in a relationship with a mother who uses guilt and shame to handle the family addiction issue. It's important for you to talk to somebody who knows what it feels like to be an addict and to get yourself filled, to get your cup filled before you ever walk in the door trying to be of service to somebody else.
So let's dive into this, the guilt, the shame, the codependency, right? Because I think with parents, a lot of the times, that's where you see that with people who are in recovery, right? One parent might have been an alcoholic or both. One parent was a codependent in some way. And so the kid, growing up is caught in the middle. And so you're always there's this balance back and forth, I think, with the person who is the recovered alcoholic, to find a balance of like, well, am I being codependent? Also, just because you're in recovery, and, I always say this is like, just because you're in recovery doesn't mean that other people are. And you have to put a pin on your expectations and just say, look, I'm going to leave my expectations about how people are going to act just because I'm not going to act out doesn't mean that other people aren't going to act out.
So true. And that's why having a discussion with a coach or a sponsor or a therapist prior to, where you can be honest with yourself about how this person has parented you in the past and what is the likelihood of them doing an about face on a special holiday. Also, what is the likelihood of them being able to go deep with you? When we deal with adult children of alcoholic issues, we start to realize and look at our parents as a vessel for our birth, but our true parenting is ourselves and higher power. And if we try to skip that work, if we try to skip feeling the feelings, walking through the trauma, and go straight to, I'm going to behave a certain way, and I know they're hurt people, and I can forgive them, we don't really truly forgive. And so whatever you can do to make sure that the holiday has, correct expectations, and also understand that you're not going to undo, the pain and the anger in one day. So
yes. That I think is the big thing. It's like, that is an unfolding situation, and maybe it's never. And here's the other thing with expectations with parents that have passed, Christina, and I know you've just gone through this, is that like there is the incompletion of it all with people that are in recovery. And I've found, having family relationships that did not and will not heal, right? They just, for whatever reason, it just did not work out like that. I think, the ability to be able to let go of that and enjoy what's in the here and now is super important, because if not, what you're doing is you're reliving that over and over and over again. And this is a deservability issue, I believe, right? Like, at some point, as bad as your situation might have been with your parent, you have to realize that, you know what, you now are in charge of recreating
Yes.
relationships in your own life. And this is where alcoholics, I think, what I call church basement thinking, I talk a lot about that in coaching, Christina, is like people get stuck in that I'm as sober as a church mouse
Right.
in the church basement, going to tons of, 12-step meetings, therapy, all this other kind of stuff, but they really can't get over it because they're
Right.
unwilling to go and say, hey, listen, just to be honest, acceptance, which we
Mm-hmm.
talk about a lot. It's like, hey, you know what? This isn't going to be what I imagined it could be. This isn't what I necessarily needed or wanted. But
Right.
now I'm going to go out and create something in my life. And you talked about that, being the mom. Look, I know
Yes.
you've shared that you didn't have the mom that you needed or wanted, but you've become that person in recovery.
I sure have, and that's really helped me with compassion, but it wasn't until I became a mom and saw my precious, innocent little baby that I really had a reference point of how painful my history was. And when we rush to forgive, when we rush to go to the story of, well, they were hurt, they didn't do it on purpose, and we kind of excuse behavior by explaining it, we're not really feeling the feelings. And it has to be like driving a clutch, with your car. If anybody has driven a clutch, where sometimes, it's feeling the feelings and really, really being willing to process them and accept them as they are, and also moving past and having daily activities that serve us and take care of ourselves. If you go to an event without really taking care of yourself, you are setting yourself up for more re-traumatizing events.
Well, now we're getting real because this is the thing that I call BS on
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of 12-step groups and in therapy. Well, they did the best they could, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is true. I believe this from a spiritual sense, that maybe at the time that, people had the awareness, they didn't have the awareness. There are some things I look back on when I was drinking, I was like, I don't even I don't even relate to that person. If
Right.
the alcoholic, young Damon met the Damon of today, they wouldn't even like each other.
Sure.
Two, they wouldn't recognize you. They wouldn't recognize each other. Right.
Sure.
So I understand that people change. And I think that's the beautiful thing that you learn in recovery. But sometimes people do know better and they choose not to do well. And
So
this is the
true.
thing I think that you learn in recovery, that you can't just brush it all under the rug and say, well, this person, they
Yeah.
did the best they could with what they had. Maybe
Yeah.
that's not 100% true. Maybe they
No.
knew they could do better, but they simply didn't give a shit enough to do better.
So true. And what you're talking about to me errs on, leans toward denial. Because it wasn't until I held my son did I really understand the injury and the pain that occurred. And so I couldn't really forgive somebody until I knew what happened. I call it, being too smart for your own good, fourth stepping your way out of actually feeling feelings. And I remember people would say, well, they didn't write a book on it. And I would want to raise my hand and say, no, they wrote thousands of books on it. I've done it. I learned how not to abuse my child. I learned how to let my child have a healthy life. I did the hard work. They didn't. And I know that some people can meet that and say, well, you want to live in the past. But I believe that true freedom has to come from being willing to face this happened. Acceptance is understanding that your history will always be that way.
Yeah. And
Nobody's
and I think the thing is that people look at this, they brush it all under the rug, and they say, well, you know what, they did the best they could with what they had.
Mhm.
We're not talking about buying an iPhone
No,
in 2015 and then a new iPhone comes out in 2022.
right.
These are like basic principles, right?
Yes,
Now,
they
I
are.
do believe that people's consciousness evolve. And I look at my consciousness and I know that it's evolved, right? But you're
Sure.
right. When you become a parent, you realize it's like, wow, you know what? There were some gaping holes in maybe some situations. I was very fortunate. I had an amazing mother, right? Like,
Wow.
even though there were other family members that weren't so amazing, I had an amazing mother who always I learned a lot from. And so happy Mother's Day, Mom, if you're listening. She's a big fan of the show. So
Oh,
I have who's an amazing mom. I see everything that you do for your son, and you're great at it. So I do believe that you do get a second chance in recovery, even though the people around you might not have taken advantage of that.
So true. And you brought up a really great point that needs to be shared. When we have these opportunities to mother differently, when we have the opportunities to enter into a healthy relationship, it does create the healing. Okay. When we hold people that cannot change accountable and we put our power in them, that if they change, I can heal, we are doing the same thing to ourselves that happened. But when we say, I'm going to change, I'm going to have relationships, it's amazing how much that can truly heal the mother wound. It has for me. It really has. Being able to provide that unconditional love and that acceptance of my son and others has allowed me to have unconditional acceptance of myself.
Well, look, the thing is that you're willing to do the work. And
Mhm.
I want to address the doing of the work, right? Because we're gonna, if you're a regular member and listener of the podcast, we've integrated these recovered life discussions, which I mentioned in there, and we had a whole thing that we're putting up that will air in the next couple of days about setting healthy boundaries that you do in a
Yes.
recovered life. And one of the things that was interesting is there's a lot of people that comment that had that weren't great parents. They
Right.
they firmly admit it, right? And mothers that came in, it's like they drank, they did the best that they could, but now maybe they have older children and that they've decided, hey, I'm going to get sober, and they're on the path. They've got a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, maybe even more, right? And day to day, they're doing the right thing, but those kids have not come back into the fold necessarily, right?
Right.
And we hear this a lot, Christine, in coaching, and we've all had this experience. There are people that, when you decide that you're going to get sober, will walk away and might
Right.
not come back. They might
Right.
not come back because they don't like the person that you used to be, and they've had enough, right? They've had enough. And some people do come back. And so I'd love to address that for a little bit, because that's a huge segment of the audience too. People who were raised in drug and alcohol addiction, who then later became parents and raised kids in alcoholism and drug addiction.
So, so true. And, for me, when that occurs and someone comes to me with that, I try to share that that is their child's journey. It is not their journey. And they may have been 100% or let's say 80% responsible for the original injury. But as an individual, we are 100% responsible for our own healing. And it's important to remember that. And we don't like it. We don't like it when things, don't go our way. But unconditional acceptance, true love, means that you allow the hurt child to live their own life and come to healing on their own terms. And it's important to continue to get support for yourself. It's important not to live in that place, because you're not a useful parent if you live in this self-flogging place either. You're not useful. And our job as parents is to share our humanity, share the grace that we have for ourselves and others, and to wait and let our children come to terms with the healing that they have to.
And I think, one of the very basic things too, to add to that, is just you staying sober makes a huge impact. And this is the thing,
Huge.
as coaches, we get people who are young parents or older parents or whatever the
Right.
whole, I know I have had discussions and have worked with people who have been all different types of walks of life in different situations in their family. And I will tell you, I've never seen a situation where just staying sober and doing the right thing day to day, no matter what that family member does, that I think makes the biggest impact. Just doing the deal. Like, I think that we get so used, Christina, to being sober,
Mm-hmm.
and we get so used to seeing the miracles happen.
Right.
I firmly believe that. So I always said, look, Christina, if you're a transformation junkie, recovery is for you, because you see, like I see it all the time. I see people come back from nothingness and end up creating these amazing lives, right? And I'm going to tell you how that happened was simply sometimes by just getting a day at a time, a minute at a time, a second at a time. There was no other great mystery than they just held the course and did
Yes.
the right thing and stayed sober. It was literally that simple. It's not that simple if you're in it, if you're the
Sure.
one doing it. But really, I think people underestimate the impact that they have on a family structure, especially if you come from a lineage of alcoholism, by just staying sober.
Wow, you're so right. Preach, Damon, preach. I mean, truly, the shame that's attached to this disease can easily help us forget the accomplishment. And I always end up reminding somebody. I think we had a show recently about how progress is way more important than even achievement. And remembering how difficult it is to live in this world without anesthesia, that there are many people who do not do that. There are many people that don't want to face their issues and they shop it away or they do all kinds of maybe lesser addictive behaviors. If you are willing to show up and be present in your children's lives and others' lives, you have already won. And everything else that's going to happen is going to be a direct result of you making that decision. And it won't
Absolutely. And
happen.
yeah.
I was going to say it won't happen in our time frame, but it does happen.
No, absolutely. And you know what? And the thing is, I think, is that you don't have to be perfect doing it. I know as a parent, I've been less than perfect in some areas, but the fact of the matter is I've always showed up, had a
Mhm.
relatively great attitude, right?
Right.
And was willing to do what I needed to do. That is, and participate. That's it, to try. Like, we don't all have skills that we maybe need to have, and we're learning skills, and thank God we're learning skills, right? Like,
Yes.
I know I am far from perfect, and I'm never going to be perfect, and that is okay with me. It's the journey of it and the doing of it that really makes the experience.
And because you do that for yourself, you are modeling to your daughter that that's all she has to do too, is show up and be willing to do better and learn better.
That's
Um,
it. That's it.
that is parenting. And I always remind people, and this is specifically towards special needs, but all parents need to remind themselves of this. Self-care is good parenting
Yes,
because
absolutely. Absolutely. I think, say that again, Christina, for the people who did not hear that.
even with special needs children, self-care is good parenting. The best thing I can do for my son is take care of myself so that he doesn't feel responsible for taking care of me. And he gets to live his journey and I get to live mine.
Absolutely. You know what? This has been such a great segment, Christina. Happy Mother's Day to you. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out
Yes.
there. You're very special in what you do. And, we would just like to say that, if you're a mom listening right now and you don't feel that you're getting what you need and you're sober, stay sober. Stay doing the deal, because miracles do happen.
Yes. Yes, they will.
So, Christina, we've got more show ahead. It's going to be even great. It's going to be even better, the show that we've got, the next segment that we have coming up, if we couldn't beat this one, because it was a really good segment. So I do want to mention before we dive into the next segment here, that we have got a really special Recovered Life community going on, and it is at recoveredlife.us. That's recoveredlife.us. And we would love for you to join, because this is the great thing about Recovered Life, is that it's free. Two, it takes less than a minute to join. And three, you're going to get great exclusive content. With people like Christina, free e-courses on there. Somebody told me the other day that they had a shopping issue, that they were spending too much money, Christina. And I was like, you got to check out the shopping addiction worksheet.
Yes.
In video that Stacey Danford put up there. That's 100% free. That is huge savings right there. And it's going to get you further along in your recovery. So we would just like to mention that if you are not a member of Recovered Life, please join. That is recoveredlife.us, recoveredlife.us. So after this quick break, we're going to come back with segment number 2.
Yay.
You're listening to the Recovered Life Show.
Welcome back to Recovered Life Show. Before we enter into the segment, I want to remind everybody this show is being brought to you by Recovered Life contributors like me and people like you. Make sure to like, share, follow, leave us a comment. info.recoveredlife.us for complete free. It is completely free. And leave us a donation that allows us to keep helping others. That's info.recoveredlife.us. Are you ready to talk about this article, Damon?
I am ready. I don't believe it. I'm going to go right up front. I'm going to be the contrary. Believe it. I'm going to go right up front. I'm going to be the contrary. Okay, so we're on the same page here. Let me set this up because a lot of people say it's like, hey, you got to tell us what you're talking about. It's not
yes, helpful
conversation. So Christina turned on this article to me. She sent me a copy of this, and I had a hard time believing it. And the title was "Decrease in Adolescent Drug Use and Alcohol Use in 2021." And I was like, that can't be the case. So let's discuss this article. Because I, when I really dove into it, looked at the statistics, they did decrease.
Yes.
According to this article. But there's a little bit of context that I would say that after you read it, that you realize it's like, well, it did decrease, but not after this huge increase that we had in 2020.
Yes, that is something to remember. It did decrease in 2021 after there was a huge leap in 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020, right? I got married. No, I'm just kidding. It was the pandemic.
You did get married in 2020.
I did get married, and then the pandemic happened literally the week after. And our kids were sent home. We worked from home. Isolation increased, and there was trauma. I mean, we were afraid for our lives. And we saw in the adult population a huge increase into addiction and consuming alcoholic beverages and drugs. It was like the boundaries were off, and people, were drinking in their front lawn, right? People who had these really good boundaries, and I call them the governors, like on your golf cart, that slowed them down, where all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm going to drink at 9:00 in the morning. And so I found this so fascinating, and I'm with you. I don't know if I believe this. I mean, I believe it based on the evidence, but just like every statistic, data, study that's out there, what we seek, we find, right? When we're looking for a certain perspective, you can find it. And what the article shared was that the use of between 8th graders, 10th graders, and 12th graders, that it actually went down in 2021. And that shocked the hell out of me. What did you think?
Well, let me just set this up too. I have this on the screen if you're listening on the live stream, and I will put a link to it in the show notes of the podcast and rebroadcast of this. I'll tell you, I believe it statistically on one level, but I think that they underreported the increase that they had during the pandemic to begin with, because having a teenager and watching friends of the teenager, right? And just being tapped in, just driving through, neighborhoods in Los Angeles when kids get out of school, running errands or whatever, you saw, and they talk about vaping, you saw the vaping, you see the stuff. So I believe that there was a little decrease at the beginning of the pandemic, because I think a lot of the kids went home. And they felt that they didn't have the walk home from school. They didn't have these areas of time that they were alone or not under supervision to be able to do this. But I think as people started to melt down mental health wise during, especially parents who are homeschooling and all this other stuff, I think there became more opportunities, right, to be able to do this. And unfortunately, I know people that I'm connected with on social media and just know through business whose kids died because they were, one kid in particular died because he ordered stuff literally on Postmates, and it was a drug that was delivered or something like that. It was like some delivery service. I don't want to say Postmates if that wasn't the case. So I take that back, but some delivery service that brought it over, and the kid died literally in his living room with his parents in the next room. So I don't believe it on one issue. I do believe it to a certain degree that kids are coming back into school their part-time jobs, all this other kind of stuff, and they maybe have less time, and they maybe don't have that level of anxiety that they used to have because they're actually participating in life.
Well, the study goes on to share that, that they thought maybe the statistics were lower because they took this study, they did the reports when the adolescents were at home, and maybe they weren't being as honest. And they explain how that's not the case because they used a subgroup and figured out no, people were being honest. My thought was that people were unsupervised during this year. And so the opportunity for adolescents to experiment and get in contact with others or have these, peer pressure moments was reduced. And I do believe that. And it'll be very interesting to see what 2022 numbers share. I know that we have talked about this on this show in particular about the need for more education, for more support in the mental health field. We need to address this. We have all just been through a traumatic event and are still picking up the pieces. And I don't think we're going to know how that affected our school-aged children for many years. But
let's get the facts here. I mean, this lists it pretty good. Look, if you have a teenager, there's basically a 50% chance that they are using drugs and alcohol. It says that 12th graders, 46.5 reported using percent reported using alcohol in the past year in 2021. And it decreased from 55.3% in 2022. So that's a huge number any way you look at it, whether it's 55.3% or 46.5. If we're looking at just the average there, half the teenage population is using drugs or alcohol.
Yes, so important. And just like you shared with your story about the death of that young man, we do not know if the next time one of our children picks up it, whether it will be laced with fentanyl and they lose their life. That's how serious this is. The drugs are definitely more powerful than perhaps when, as a parent, you were in high school. The access is available, like even delivered to your door. These kind of conversations have to take precedence. They have to be of the most importance. And I love, I would love to believe that drug use is going down. I would, but I don't believe it. I believe that we're not out of the woods.
Well, let's look at this harder drugs, let's say not marijuana or alcohol, which I believe are still hard drugs.
Yes.
We've had this, we've had many shows about this whole myth that marijuana is not addictive and is healthy for you.
Right.
Yeah. Both of those are not true. Right. But let's look at this, any illicit drug other than marijuana. So we're talking about, prescription medication, unprescribed or anything else. And that's the fentanyls and all the other things that are out there. 8th graders, 4.6% reported using any illicit drug other than marijuana in the past year in 2021, compared to 7.7% in 2022. That means that you've got, in 2020, you had 7.7%,
right?
7 out of 100 kids using illicit drugs other than marijuana. That's huge. And you have to start asking yourself, it's like, that's just what this kid said. I knowing teenagers and having kids, they're not going to tell you the entire truth necessarily all the time. So that's a huge number. And when you go up, when you go up to the marijuana and the vaping of nicotine, this is even great. When you look at 10th graders, almost 20% of 10th graders are vaping nicotine.
Yes. Isn't that astonishing? I mean, it's really, really true that we can't talk about this enough to continue to share it with parents, to pay attention, school officials, everyone, that this population is very vulnerable to ending their life early, not even bringing up the percentage of addiction that will occur. we're not going down in the overall numbers as a population. And in fact, we're increasing. And we can see it in our adolescents, even if there is a little dip in 2021.
Now, I would like to say that things are getting better, and this could also be a possibility, Christina, that things are getting better because what the pandemic did was bring out more mental health discussion. And this is true. And I see this everywhere. I
Yes.
see this with friends who would never have a conversation about mental health. They're just not the kind of people who would do that, right? Having conversations, I had somebody come up to me that I know very well and was like saying, hey, concern for the kids that their mental wellness is good, and we're
Wow.
taking these steps. And I was like, wow, some people in your life, when you know that they're not really good at adapting to change in certain ways, when you see them embracing that discussion, then I think it's like, wow. And I've seen that a lot. So,
It's good.
I do believe in one sense that we're really going in a positive direction. I also think that, hard drug use is at an all-time high, though.
Wow.
I will say that. But I think the awareness, though, with teens that certain people will become alcoholics and drug addicts and get addicted is increasing. I think the
Yes.
awareness of kids being able to say, no, I don't do that, is easier than when I was in high school.
Oh, for sure. For sure. The more as the adult population embraces a sober lifestyle, the adolescents will fall in to place. And it's about having these kind of conversations and explaining the risk that's involved, explaining that alcohol is an incredibly dangerous drug, and illicit drugs are way too available. And I love that our world is opening up the discussions about mental health. And I think that the more we talk about the coping mechanisms that are out there and how unhealthy they are, and have places for our adolescents to go to get support, the better this is going to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we've seen the increase. I think there's two things that are going on simultaneously. The drugs are getting harder and they're getting more accessible, and they are going through, we had talked about in a past show about the trend in college campuses of kids taking ketamine, which is basically
Right.
what, a horse tranquilizer, right?
Yes.
I'd never even heard of such a thing, right? But yet it's out there, right? So that's increasing. But at the same time, this whole idea of discussion of identifying kids earlier that are going through this. Now, this is where I think the biggest hope is. It's intervening earlier with not just the addiction substance, whether it be alcohol, marijuana, other hard illicit drugs, but the behavior, the alcoholic thinking, or, the addiction thinking, intervening earlier with kids to say, hey, you know what? There's something about the pattern in that thinking that kind of tends to be addictive. You tend to be prone to addictive type of personality. Let's be aware of that. And also biology. Let's be aware that you have family members that have suffered from addiction before. This, I think, is a game changer, because although we see more adolescents, look, the number of people who identify that they're either trying to get sober or are sober is increasing drastically. But I also think what's increasing drastically is this conversation around it, getting there early, interjecting early before it goes off the rails.
Take the shame and stigma out of it too. I have my longest term friend, her mother always shared with her that both of her grandfathers were alcoholic and that she needed to be careful. And now I look back and think that is amazing that she educated her children at an early age to watch out for this. But if we keep it a secret, if we keep it about willpower and this person's defective, people are still going to avoid and resist help because they don't want to believe that something is wrong with them. They need to know that there is help, and it's not a shame situation. They are not worse people because they have addiction tendencies.
Well said, Christina Dennis. This has been an amazing episode of the Recovered Life Show. Episode number 106, Wednesday, May 4th, 2022. We have a very special live show coming up Friday. I'm not going to tell people what it is, but you got to tune in because it's all about our favorite person, Christina Dennis.
Oh.
And she's going to share with us on Friday. So you guys tune in Friday to see what we're talking about. It's going to be a great show. So Christina, any final thoughts here about the Recovered Life discussions or anything that we've got going on in the Recovered Life community that you'd like to share before we wrap up this episode?
Join the community. End isolation. You have a home and it's here with us, and you are wanted, loved, and seen.
Isolate no more. You can join the Recovered Life community and connect with us, connect with other like-minded people. And guys, we really want you to live your best recovered life. That's what this is all about. Episode number 106, Wednesday, May 4th, 2022, in the can. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.